Okay, thank you very much for joining. Before we start, let me briefly introduce our housekeeping rules. So you joined the book launch event by ADB Institute and Karak Institute. The book is called Developing Infrastructure in Central Asia, Impacts and Financing Mechanisms. You can now download this book from free access. You can use your mobile phone and put it next to this QR code to download it, or you can follow this link below. The link also will be provided in chat. We'll provide links to agenda, biographies, and book and other material. Okay, everything will be provided in chat. So let me please explain. For speakers, those people mentioned in agenda, your screen will look something like this, and you will have control over your camera and microphone. So please, when you don't speak, please keep yourself muted, and you can keep your camera off. When you start speaking, please unmute yourself and put your camera on. Audience might type questions in Q&A box. So please, especially after you finish speaking, please look at Q&A box and you can type your answers in the Q&A box. If during this webinar, if you have questions, so we encourage questions and we want this webinar to be interactive. So please click this raise hand. If you don't see raise hand, click on participants and then you see raise hand. Or you can just simply unmute yourself and say that you have a question during the Q&A. Okay, so for the audience, screen looks different, simpler. You don't have camera or audio, but you have raise hand. So audience also encouraged to ask questions. There are two ways for you to ask questions. One is to type in Q&A box, and another one ask live by raising hand. So after you raise your hand, if session chair or moderator will name you, I will unmute you and you are allowed be to talking. Okay, so you can ask your questions. One more feature we have in this webinar is interpretation. There are two languages, English and Russian. So most of presentations will be in English, but questions could be in Russian. So if that happens, please select your language. So there is at the bottom of your screen, there is this globe. You can click it and then you can select your language. Okay, so let me remind you, as usual, we have consent to use without permission or compensation. This event will be photographed, maybe streamlined and video recorded. By attending, accepting connection, or continuing participation in the event, participants thereby consent to the possible use of their names, likeness, voice, spoken or written comments, or papers, presentations in whatever form in all media publications, video sharing websites, recordings, disseminations, or other external affairs purposes for the Institute without compensation or permission. So the slides from today's event will be posted on our website on the event link. We'll post video and presentation slides. Disclaimer for presentations: the views expressed in the presentations are the views of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the Karak Institute, the Asian Development Bank Institute, the Asian Development Bank, its board of directors, or the governments they present. ADBI and Karak Institute do not guarantee the accuracy of the data included in the presentations and accept no responsibility for any consequences of their use. Terminology used may not necessarily be consistent with ADB official terms. Okay, so I will briefly also give the same explanation in Russian. After that, we'll have a photo session, so please be ready. Добрый день. Добро пожаловать на презентацию книги «Развитие инфраструктуры Центральной Азии. Экономическое воздействие. Механизмы финансирования». Книга находится в свободном доступе. Вы можете использовать телефон, чтобы сканировать этот QR-код, или пойти по этой ссылке. Мероприятие организовано совместно Азиатским банком развития институтом и Царец институтом. Для участников, пожалуйста, используйте Q&A бокс, где вы можете написать свои вопросы, и можете использовать raise hand, поднять руку, если вы хотите задать вопрос. После этого мы вам включим микрофон. Пожалуйста, используйте переводчик. Внизу вашего экрана есть функция переводчика, где вы можете выбрать язык. В основном презентации будут на английском, но вы можете задавать вопросы на русском. Согласие на использование без разрешения или компенсации. В ходе мероприятия могут быть сделаны фотографии, фото, видеозаписи или трансляция в прямом эфире. Принимая ссылку, подключаясь к мероприятию, участвуя в нем, участники тем самым соглашаются на возможное использование своего имени, фото, голоса, устных и письменных комментариев или документов. Презентации в любой форме во всех публикациях в СМИ, на веб-сайтах, обмена видео, записях, ссылках и для других целей внешних связей института без компенсации или разрешения. Отказ от ответственности за презентации. Мнения, выраженные в презентации, являются взглядами авторов и не обязательно отражают взгляды и политика Института ЦАРЭС, Института Азиатского банка развития, Азиатского банка развития, его совета директоров или представительств, которые представляют. Институт Азиатского банка развития, Институт ЦАРЭС не гарантирует точность данных, включенных в презентации, и не несут ответственность за любые последствия их использования. Используемая терминология не обязательно может соответствовать официальным терминам АБР. Окей. I would like to invite everyone to take a photo. Let's put camera on.
Okay.
We have 2 minutes. Kumiko-san, may I ask you please to play video? Okay, let's start our book launch. So I would like to invite Dean and CEO of ADBI, Tetsushi Sanobi, please.
Okay, thank you, Dina, and thank you for the nice video. Respected Director of Kyrgyz Institute, Mr. Saeed Shakir Shah, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to provide some opening remarks for this happy, memorable virtual gathering for celebrating the publication of the new book entitled Developing Infrastructure in Central Asia, Impacts and Financing Mechanisms. The book was just released last week as an ADBI book in collaboration with Kyrgyz Institute. It was planned and edited by Professor Naoyuki Yoshino, former Dean of ADBI, Dr. Bihong Huang, a former colleague at ADBI, now working at the Monetary and Capital Market Department of IMF, Dr. Dina Azgarieva, a central player coming rising star of ADBI, and Dr. Kaiser Abbas, the Director of Research Division, Kyrgyz Institute. As I have heard from Dr. Dina, this book was inspired by ADB's report, Meeting Asia's Infrastructure Needs, according to which Central Asia would need to double its investment over the next decade in infrastructure for power, transportation, telecommunication, water, and sanitation in order to maintain its growth momentum, eradicate the remaining poverty, and address climate change. The required amount would be about 33 billion USD annually through 2030, or 6.8% of the region's GDP. This required investment is not just huge in amount, but also associated with several other challenges, such as low population density, lack of long-term investors like gigantic pension funds and well-developed insurance markets, and mostly controlled utility markets with low tariffs for water, electricity, central heating, gas, among others. Moreover, the COVID-19 pandemic has imposed a severe constraint on the use of public funds. The book aims at demonstrating how deep and widespread the impact of infrastructure investment on the local economy is. The impact could be widespread because the investment not only boosts the productive activities of the direct users of the infrastructure, but also spills over to other productive activities. The impact would be deep because these favorable spillover effects could come back from this person, that business, and other activities to you, just like the video introduced. The resulting increase in incomes, demand for goods and services, demand for shop space, workspace, and residential space, accordingly, room rents, and land price, and eventually the tax revenue in the locality. The book also aims to highlight the role that the private sector can play in infrastructure investment finance, and the possibility that the increased tax revenue is used to encourage private sector participation, thereby achieving successful public-private partnership. I look forward to reading the book very soon. I'd like to emphasize also that the book is of open access. That is, the book can be downloaded freely from ADBI website. Please share this book with your colleagues and students. I hope this book and the discussion that follows today will help to guide evidence-based policy making toward filling the huge infrastructure gap in the region. With that, I wish you a very fruitful discussion for the next 2 hours, and thank you for your attention. Over to you, Dina.
Thank you very much, Dean Sanobi, for your kind words. I would like to invite to continue opening remarks by Dr. Said Shakil Shah. He is director of Karek Institute, and his biography can be accessed using the link in the chat box.
Thank you very much, Nina. Just to confirm, can you hear me, please?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Dean Snobe, respected chairs, presenters, co-editors, panelists. It gives me great pleasure to talk to you today on the occasion of launch of this book, which is outcome of a collaborative project between ADBI and CI. Development of infrastructure through various modes of investment has a clear nexus with economic growth, productive investments, job creation, and poverty reduction. Development of infrastructure, including roads, railways, air transportation, ports, water and sanitation, telecommunication, and energy, is a key catalyst for economic growth. According to World Bank, there is a financing gap of estimated $1.3 trillion per year, and bridging those gaps through traditional and innovative modes of investment is paramount for attaining the SDGs. In the developing Asia alone, such infrastructure investment needs up to the year 2030 are estimated to be $1.7 trillion, according to ADB. And such needs in Central Asia have been highlighted by Dean Snobe in his opening remarks. So traditionally, governments have relied upon government budgets, banks, and multilateral development partners for infrastructure development projects. In the context of Central Asia, ADB has been a long-term partner, not only investing in such projects through country strategies, but also taking a programmatic approach through initiatives like Karek program, which has developed an investment portfolio of over $39.2 billion over the last 2 decades, mostly targeting infrastructure. Projects of regional connectivity, especially for a region like Central Asia, provide additional prospects of returns on investment as they connect economic powerhouses of Asia and Europe. However, the traditional modes of infrastructure financing, already insufficient to meet financing need of infrastructure development, are facing further squeeze due to situation emerging out of COVID-19, as highlighted by Dean Snobe in his remarks. Public finances are already stretched, coping with an array of challenges posed by health crisis and economic shock. The imminent relegation of this important segment of public spending, lower down the stack of public spending priorities, poses risk to prospects of economic growth and recovery in Central Asia and beyond. Meanwhile, there are new financing opportunities for developing countries like BRI and the Partnership for Quality Infrastructure. In addition, greater involvement of private sector through various instruments of investment also needs to be explored, like institutional investment in public infrastructure projects by insurance and pension funds, project bonds raised in capital market, and so on. However, in the region under study, such financing options are beset by additional challenges like relatively lower level of development of capital markets. In this context, one focus area of this book is public-private partnership as a viable option. Besides pooling of financial resources of governments and private sector, it also gives encouragement to private financing to partake in big infrastructure development projects through risk diversification. The book being launched today will provide a context for promoting regional discourse on infrastructure finance, hopefully generating new ideas and exploring potential way forward in addressing complex challenges Karek countries face. The book provides very interesting infrastructure financing narratives from 7 countries that are part of Karek program. Researchers have used various models to study the impact of infrastructure projects, like impact of road infrastructure projects on wealth, impact of airport construction project on revenues, impact of new railway lines projects on employment and industrial output, impact of road construction project on poverty alleviation, and impact of urban transport project on household income, and so on. One very interesting book chapter comprehensively reviews the evolution of financing models for infrastructure projects in the People's Republic of China since 1978. The authors identify the potential risks of different financing models and highlight the importance of risk management for sustainable development of infrastructure. CAREC Institute, being knowledge arm of the CAREC program, will keep a focus on infrastructure financing issues. CI also plans to develop project on digital infrastructure, as it is prerequisite for 4 IR technologies. Initial assessment indicate that there is substantial gap in this area, and it requires policy alignment and substantial investment to bridge this gap. In the end, I wish you all a great discussion. My very special thanks once again to ADBI for continuous support and collaboration with CI, and also for this joint book launch. We are highly grateful for our esteemed panelists and presenters. And also my special appreciation goes to the organizer, Ms. Dina from ADBI, and our colleagues from the research division of CI, Dr. Kasser, and head of the research division, Dr. Skander, for their hard work to make this project a success. So I will stop here. Thank you very much and wish you a very productive sessions ahead. Thank you very much, and over to you, Dina.
Thank you very much, Dr. Said Shakil, for a very nice overview of the book, very nice welcoming remarks. So let's continue with the next session. We selected 3 papers which will be presented today from the book. And the session chair is today Bihong Huang. She is, as Dean Sanobi mentioned, she is our former colleague from ADB Institute. Currently, she is economist at Monetary and Capital Market Department at the IMF. So before giving word to Bihong, I will just launch a polling. So please, everyone, vote for questions, the one which most applies to you. And at the end, I will show results. Bihong, please.
Okay, thanks, Dina. And also great to see all the colleagues, Dean Sonobe and also Professor Yoshino. Yeah, it's my great pleasure to join this event. Actually, we start this project in 2017, and then yeah, it takes quite a long time. But finally, we have this book coming out. Very excited about this event. And today, actually, in this session, we have 3 presentations that will cover 3 countries in Central Asia, including Kazakhstan, Kyrgyz, and also Georgia, and also cover 3 kinds of infrastructure, including the railway, roads, and airport. So before we start the presentation, let me remind you that for each presentation, you only have 10 minutes. So please keep the timeline. And then I will remind you for the last 2 minutes. And for all the questions, as Dina mentioned, please put in the Q&A box. And if you really want to discuss with the with the authors, you can also raise your hand. Okay. Now, let me welcome Professor BBQ Aydahanova from the Kazakhstan University of Economics, Finance, and International Trade. She will present the paper, Measuring Impacts and Infrastructure in Kazakhstan. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for inviting me to participate in this book launch event. I would like to present you my study on the topic Measuring Impact of Financing Infrastructure in Kazakhstan, which included as one of the chapters of this book. At the beginning, I would like to give you an overview of the structure of my presentation. In accordance with the content of the research, firstly, I would like to give you an overview of the macroeconomic state of the country in foreign investment in Kazakhstan. Then I will talk about the public-private partnership development in Kazakhstan. Further, I will present the Khorgos-Yetigin railway infrastructure project, which I consider it in my empirical part of the study. Then I will Then I will present the Kyrgyz railway infrastructure project, which I considered in my empirical part of the study. Then I will present the introduce the difference methodology which was applied in this study, and also I will present the regional and sub-regional model constructed with data approach, and then I will talk about the empirical result, conclusion, and policy implications. First, we analyze the main macroeconomic indicators in the paper, which showed that the economic growth of the country has been very volatile over the recent years, depending on the influence of the various external and internal factors. Kazakhstan ranks first among these countries in the term of foreign direct investment. The volume of FDI inflows differs in various sectors of the economy. The analysis has shown that the most attractive sectors for investment are still is the oil and gas and extractive mining industries. According to the investment in fixed capital, the structure of financing is different by sources of financing. Currently, the goal of state investment policy is to invest in infrastructure, stimulate the development of the non-oil sectors, and increase the role of the private sector in the economy. In this part of the paper, we analyze the public-private partnership development in Kazakhstan. The government of Kazakhstan in 2008 established a specialized organization of PPP, issued the joint stock company Kazakhstan Public-Private Partnership Center with 100% state participation of sole shareholder of which the Ministry of National Economy of the government of Kazakhstan. The center actively cooperates with international organizations such as World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and other organizations. Since 2010, regional PPP centers are being created in a number of regions of Kazakhstan. The center conducts an examination of concession projects in such areas as construction, operation, roads, railways, infrastructure facilities, health facilities, preschool organization, and others. In this study, we considered a PPP project in the field of the railway infrastructure. Now, I would like to present the Kyrgyz railway infrastructure project, the measure of impact of which we analyzed in our empirical study. The Kyrgyz international project is one of the largest projects undertaken on initiative by the leaders of Kazakhstan and the PRC. In the framework of this project, the Kyrgyz railway, 2,093 km long, was constructed. The construction of the new Kyrgyz railway line is of strategic importance because it opens the second railway transition between Kazakhstan and China and reduces the distance from the PRC to the eastern region of Kazakhstan in Central Asian countries. In Kazakhstan, a railway station building, an administrative building at the Altenkul border station, and engineering network with their facilities were also built. Kyrgyz railway was built in the Almaty region in the eastern region of Kazakhstan, which we consider as a treated region in our study. In this study, we use the difference in different methodology. In the empirical part of our studies, we conduct an empirical analysis of measuring the impact of the infrastructure project in Kazakhstan using econometric assessment method, namely the data approach, which was described in the research work of Professor Yashina and other scientists in assessing the implementation of infrastructure project in other countries. The data approach helps us to measure the difference between the actual result and alternative outcome by dividing the data into treated and control groups. The result reflects the difference between pre- and post-intervention data. By observing the change in both groups over time, a data coefficient can be calculated, which will serve as a measure of impact. The data approach enables us to see the effect of the particular infrastructure project by computing the difference over time, before and after the intervention, and across different regions. In our study, we analyze the impact of the PPP project in Kazakhstan on the economy, both at the regional and sub-regional level. In accordance with data approach, we divided the data into control and treated group based on geography and time. In the regional model, as a treated group, we choose the Almaty region, through which the constructed section of Kyrgyz railway passes. As the control group, we selected other region of Kazakhstan. This table presents the treated and control group relative to the location of the Kyrgyz railway. According to the DIT method, in order to test the impact of the infrastructure project over time, we distinguish between short and medium-term effect and differentiate among 3 time periods. Pre-construction period is 2000-2008, operation phase 1, 2009 to 2012, operation phase 2, 2013 to 2017. In the sub-regional model, as a treated group, we considered the sub-region of Almaty region, through which the Kyrgyz railway passes, namely Panfilovsky, Uygurski, and English-Kazakhsky sub-region or rayons. In the control group at the sub-regional level, we included one sub-region in each of the selected above region of Kazakhstan. For the econometric assessment, we consider a panel data set for all encompassing region and sub-region included in the treated and control group of both models. In the regional model, we assess the impact of the project on macroeconomic indicators such as regional GDP and tax revenues by region. The estimating equation in the regional model is as follows, where y is dependent variable describing the regional GDP or tax revenues by region. In the regional model, we use outcome on control variables measured by region. Also, in accordance with DIT method, we included in the model binary variables, indicating whether or not the observation belongs to the respective time period in the treated region. In the sub-regional model, we considered the impact of the project on economic indicators in the main sectors of the real economy, such as construction, agriculture, and industry in the sub-region under consideration. In the model, we use the variables measured by sub-region. Also, we included the binary variables indicating whether or not the observation belonged to the respective time period and treated sub-regions. Based on the result of the regional model, the treated region showed an increase in regional GDP of 18% of mean regional GDP in 2013-2017 due to the construction of the Kyrgyz railway. Moreover, the estimated increase in tax revenue in the treated region indicates that influence of the railway has increased since its construction in recent years has achieved a greater effect. The results of the sub-regional model showed that construction of the railway has a greater impact on the increase in construction work during the construction period and after its completion. As a result of spillover effect, it influenced the increase in agriculture and industrial production in the treated sub-region. In the conclusion, we can say that based on the conducted empirical research, it can be concluded that the result of the regional sub-regional model using the data approach showed that the construction of the railway had a greater economic impact on the treated sub-region in the short term. In the medium term, as a result of the spillover effect, the project had a greater impact on the increase in the macroeconomic indicators in the considered region. The DIT coefficient update on the basis of the model are positive and statistically significant, which shows a more positive impact of the project on the economic indicators in the treated group than in the control group. Generally, this study shows that development of railway infrastructure project is highly significant both for the macroeconomic and for the local economy. In this regard, the further attraction of investment in the development of railway transport infrastructure in Kazakhstan will yield a multiplicative spillover effect by increasing economic activity in the treated region, improve transit potential both domestically and with other countries, and will provide a new impulse to the development of treated sub-region as shown in this study. In the future, this will contribute to increasing the transport potential of Kazakhstan and its transformation into a major trade, international transport logistics and transit center in Central Asia, as well as transport bridge between Europe and Asia. Thank you very much.
Thanks, BBQ, for your very clear presentation. Now let me invite Mr. Campbell Kalimshakov, economist from the Kyrgyz Institute. He will present the paper on measuring impacts and financing infrastructure in Kyrgyz. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. May I share my screen? Well, thank you very much, thank you very much for giving us an opportunity to present our findings of the research. And our chapter title is Measuring Impacts and Financing Infrastructure in the Kyrgyz Republic. So basically, in this paper, in this chapter, we try to understand and provide empirical evidence on the impact of road construction project in Kyrgyz Republic and discuss the financing infrastructure in the context of the country. Also, we should note that considerable financial resources have been used for road construction in Kyrgyzstan, especially within the CAREC program. And briefly, our empirical findings indicate that at the regional level, road construction projects had a positive effect on poverty reduction and on the growth of industrial output. Also, at the sub-regional or what we call as a district level, in the short term, a positive impact on retail trade, especially in the higher mountains districts, is indicated. So these are brief information about the road construction investments in Kyrgyzstan. So we see that Bishkek, Naryn, Torghat, and most parts are completed and some parts are under construction. And we should note that here that all these roads construction projects, large projects in Kyrgyzstan, are part of the CAREC corridors. We see. So the last two in the last two lines, Osh, Saratash, Irkeshtam, and Saratash Karamik projects are completed in 2012. And part of the CAREC 2 and 5, CAREC 3, 4, and 5 corridors. So in this paper, we focus on the evaluation of the impact of these two projects as they cross through the Osh region, and one is going to the Saratash Irkeshtam, and also from Saratash to Karamik. Here we have this 7 regions of the country, and this Osh region where these road projects were undertaken. So here, what we do here is basically a difference in difference approach as a methodological base. And our difference in difference approach was used for the regional, or what we call as an oblast level, and sub-regional, or what we call as a district or rayon level analysis. And basically data comes from the 2005 to 2017 for the regional level analysis, and for the district level, it starts from the 2006 and to the 2017. But for the difference in difference model specification, we divide this data period for the pre-construction and post-construction period. So taking into account the fact that the road construction may already show its effect before the formal complete period. So we took this 2010 as a break point in terms of pre and post construction. And as we see here, for the regional level analysis, our treatment group consists of the Osh region, while remaining 6 regions are considered as a control group. And also for the outcome variable at the regional level analysis, we use a log of gross regional product, log of agricultural production, log of industrial production, poverty level, cargo transportation, and passenger turnover. And for the explanatory control variables, we use a log of population, log of investment, log of microcredit, log of export, consumer price index. And at the district level, we have three district or sub-regions where the roads are crossing through the territory of these districts. These are Karasu, Chongalai, and Alai districts. So remaining 37 districts of the country are considered within the control group. And outcome variables at the district level analysis are industrial output, retail trade, passenger turnover, and cargo transportation. All of them are expressed in terms of the log values. And the explanatory variables, this one is one of the limitations of our study. I should note that here we have only a log of population, so because of the data limitations at the district level. So here we can see this the road where the districts are crossing. This is Karasu district starting from the Osh, and one is going to the Irkeshtam, another going from to the Karamik. So we have three districts: Karasu, Alay, and Chong Malay districts. Especially these Chong Alay and Alay districts are considered as relatively mountains regions. So our regional level estimation results indicate the following. As we see, basically what we have find out for the short-term impacts in that there is no very significant effects in the short term, but for the medium term we have industrial output growth, and we have interestingly passenger turnover cargo have been affected negatively. But interestingly, this industrial output growth in the long term also is indicated, and also we have a reduction of poverty rate in the long term. Long term is observed for the 2014 and 2017 years period. So for the district level, we have for the short-term impact, retail trade growth is observed as an impact, and for the long-term impact, we have cargo transportation, again, passenger turnover, another negative effect. I will come up to these results briefly after this slide. And as we see, especially when we take the Alay and Chong Alay districts as a separate sample for estimations, we have the retail trade growth still higher for these two higher mountains districts, especially for the Alay district. So we see that this retail trade growth for those districts are higher, and this one indicates that local trade growth have a positive spillover effect of road construction. But what about those negative values? The negative values.
Sorry, you only have 2 minutes left over.
Okay, we think that these negative effects on cargo transportation and other transportation negative effects was mostly related to the external factors about the general tendency of external trade downturn. And after the 2014, because of general economic conditions. Well, we have some limitations, of course, small number of regions and districts, selection of an efficient comparison group, limited data availability at the district level. So basically, our conclusion is that the infrastructure investment in Kyrgyzstan is mainly financed by the international organizations, and government policy towards improvement of institutional capacity to develop the public-private partnership should be focused on, and the long-term sustainability economic effects of road construction require the creation of general business ecosystem. It's not only the investment, but other policies should be associated with in road investment too, and measures towards lowering trade barriers and promotion of and facilitation of external trade is extremely important for gaining the long-term sustainable effects of infrastructure investment. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks for your very clear presentation. Now let me invite Mr. Nastan Davis from Kiva. Are you here?
Yes.
Okay, please. The floor is yours. Yes.
Please. Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to present my paper about public-private partnerships in Georgia and impact assessment of infrastructure. As the name suggests, the paper consists of the two major parts. Next slide, please. We start with the introduction of the need of the private investments in infrastructure in Georgia, which is followed by case study, evaluation of the effect of the infrastructure on public finance, in case of Kutaisi International Airport. And in the second part, we discuss the state of public-private partnerships with associated challenges and opportunities. And finally, we provide the policy recommendations for successful promotions of PPPs in the country. Next slide, please. So the case study is, in this case study, we present a macroeconomic study that examines the impact of Kutaisi International Airport on the public finance. The airport has a strategic location. It is located around 200 kilometers from the capital, Tbilisi, and is connected to all the neighboring countries of Georgia with a radius of 300 kilometers. And in 2012, the airport went through rebuilding, after which it opened its doors to international low-cost flights as an alternative to the Tbilisi airport. The expectation is that the provision of the new infrastructure has increased the flow of tourists, promoting an improvement in economic performance of the region and neighboring regions as well. The difference approach that we deployed helped us to measure the difference between the actual outcome and the alternative outcome. We obtained the regional tax data from the Revenue Service of Georgia. We divided the data into control and treated groups on the basis of geography and time. And from the total of 11 regions in Georgia, based on different factors, we selected 3 regions as the beneficiaries of the treatment. We further differentiated between 3 time periods as we wanted to see the effect on the different phases after completion of the project. And we grouped tax data into 3 groups: total taxes, business taxes, and property taxes. Next slide, please. The result of DID analysis reflects a difference between the pre and post-intervention data. And the DID coefficient, which indicated the additional quarterly growth rate in tax revenues relative to non-treated regions, serves as a measure of the impact. And as a result, we could see relatively high growth in all type of tax in the treated regions compared with the group of control regions for at least one phase. The highest relative growth for total and business taxes were 25 and 28 percentage points, which is pretty significant. And property tax deployed the highest coefficient in the medium term with a growth of 29 percentage points. And as a result, we could conclude that after the provision of the infrastructure, the rate of growth in taxes accelerated, which proves that the revenues that infrastructure projects generate are not limited to their operational revenues. Like upgraded infrastructure stimulates the economy, creates new employment and new opportunities for the local enterprises. Next slide, please. To discuss the current state of infrastructure financing in Georgia. Historically, the major sources for the financing have been donor financing and concessional loans. Around 60% of public debt funds infrastructure projects, and the major lenders are multilateral organizations. The other sources for the financing have been state budget resources, privatization, and Eurobonds. But the legislative framework, which is displayed on the slide, puts limit on the utilization of the funds on infrastructure, which creates the need for growing involvement of private investments. Next slide, please. Recently, Georgia made steps forward to offer a favorable investment climate. The major incentive is an improved business-friendly environment, like ease of doing business, liberal tax policy, corruption-free government. These are all the factors that ranks Georgia in like top 10 in ease of doing business. And other incentives are potential to develop a logistical hub, free trade agreements, and growing industrial zones. Next slide, please. Although the term of public-private partnerships became actively used in Georgia only recently, there are like 14 projects that can be categorized as PPPs, and they have been already implemented or are in process of implementing, and most of them are in energy and transport sector. But in 2016, the government has clearly outlined the importance of greater inclusion of the private sector and expressed intention to promote public-private partnerships. And since then, significant developments were implemented into PPP policies. Like in 2016, PPP policy document was established, which was followed after 2 years was followed by PPP law and PPP secondary legislation. And finally, PPP unit was established and methodologies for project assessments were developed. Next slide, please. And in order to gain better clarity where Georgia is now with the PPP development stage, we have assessed the current policy by benchmarking it against international good practices. And for that, we used a report published by World Bank in 2019. The report benchmarks regulatory frameworks of economics around the world against internationally recognized good practices. And Georgia was part of this study. So what we did is that we took the results from the study and updated it, taking into account the recent developments in the policy. And after conducting this exercise, we have observed that there were notable upgrades in policies, mainly in the phases of preparation and procurement of PPPs. Next slide, please. And we have further identified the main challenges that are still remaining for the successful development of PPPs. And these challenges are the challenge of creating a pipeline of bankable projects, low awareness of public-private partnerships among government officials, the business sector, and public, as this concept of PPPs is still very new to Georgian society, and government departments have very little experience in preparing and managing PPP projects. Also, the challenges in inadequate skill set of workers, because leading successful PPPs requires government officials to have like essential skills to initiate, prepare, and lead very complex projects. Finally, attracting long-term financing and underdeveloped domestic capital market can be a huge challenge that PPP still faces in Georgia. But recently, government together with the National Bank has elaborated a capital market development strategy and action plan that we believe that will support the growth of PPPs in future. Next slide, please. And based on the empirical and theoretical research that we have conducted, we developed policy recommendations for the government to promote PPPs successfully. And these are the recommendations, which is to, first of all, to raise awareness of PPPs amongst government officials and in the business sector. We strongly recommend launching a capacity building programs that will address the government officials who are or will potentially be in charge of the implementation of the projects.
Sorry, Nasta, you have 2 minutes left.
To develop robust methodologies for the assessment of the projects, like to develop quantitative and qualitative assessment methods of conducting socio-economic analysis of the projects. We have some successful example of this for different countries, which are mentioned in the paper. Also, like to develop a market sounding procedure through which important feedback from the lender community can be obtained, and this will inform the project preparation phase and shape the risk allocation matrix in very market acceptable manner. Another recommendation is to promote project development facilities, which will help in to conduct studies, design, structure, and procure PPPs. And finally, to raise the rate of return on infrastructure projects through viability gap funding. To incentivize private investment, the government needs to consider to fill the viability gaps through like different instruments like capital grants or subsidies. And for this, like to make this kind of decisions, government needs to be equipped with like tools to assess the impact of the infrastructure. So the study that we conducted together with all these recommendations, I hope that will act as a guidance for the government to develop the tools for impact assessment further and to consider filling viability gap for private investors. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Nastan, for your very comprehensive presentation. Okay, now it's time for Q&A. So in the Q&A box, I saw one question was raised about the position after 2017. Actually, I also interested in the situation, especially after COVID-19. You know, due to the COVID-19, for a lot of developing countries, actually the fiscal deficit have increased dramatically. On one hand, we know fiscal expenditure has increased a lot to cover like healthcare expenditure, the social protection support for small business and so on. And on the other hand, because of lockdown and also economic slowdown, the fiscal revenue has decreased. So I wonder how is the situation in the Central Asia in terms of supporting the infrastructure construction. So I would like each of the presenters to update the situation in your country. How is the infrastructure construction in your country? Are they continue or are they suspended? Do the government have any plan to finance the future infrastructure development? Because I know a lot of countries, especially for developing countries, actually the need for infrastructure is still huge and also urgent. Let's start from PPQ. Okay. PPQ, could you please update your the situation in Kazakhstan?
Mm-hmm. In Kazakhstan, we have also very negative influence of COVID disease in the economic situation. In last year, we have negative economic growth and we have declining of economic businesses and economic activity in the whole economy. And the government of Kazakhstan measured more measurement for the development of national economy and businesses in Kazakhstan. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Kemborg, would you like to update the situation in Kyrgyz?
Generally, the COVID-19 conditions, especially maybe the first half of the 2020, because of the strict lockdown measures, and not only because of the economic conditions, but rather about the general conditions for which brought about the restrictions to human mobility, produced some delay in the infrastructure projects, but we see that still, despite the fact that the government budget had some issues for financing, but still infrastructure projects which were planned are underway. And we see some portions of the new projects are planned again for the upcoming year, for the current fiscal year. So yes, the health expenditures and other social expenditures, we see that's a priority because of the COVID conditions, but the infrastructure projects with the support of the international donor organizations are in the process and under the implementation.
Thanks. Thank you for your update. Yeah, Ms. Nasdam, would you like to give some update in Georgia about the infrastructure construction after COVID-19?
Sure. Yes, as in other countries, the growth slowed down significantly in Georgia as well, and pandemic will affect investments and has already affected. However, as far as I know, because I'm not in Georgia for the last couple of years, the construction itself of the infrastructure never stopped. There were, of course, some impediments because of lockdown measures and because of mobility restrictions, but the physical construction of the projects is still going on.
Thanks. Now let's open the floor. If you have any questions, please raise your hand or yeah, please. Okay. Mr. Guanta, right? Dina, could you unmute him?
Yeah, sorry. I have one question each for the presenters. First, on the Kazakhstan, this is maybe just for clarification for the others as well. I would like to know what's the reason of the declining impact. If you look at the impact across different kind of outcome, tax revenue, and then regional GDP, the other four basically, and they're kind of declining, but the impact on the construction workers actually keep increasing. Maybe you can keep explanation on that. On the Kyrgyz Republic, I just would like to, maybe you can dig down more on the negative impact, because I think that's actually the most interesting part of your research, in my opinion, actually, because sometimes we just expect that all of the impact going to be positive, but you actually highlighting some of negative impacts. Maybe you can dig down more why what the reason. I think this is linked very much with Professor Yoshino's work earlier, that he introduced also that there's possibility for negative spillover effects. And then the third question for Georgia, you know, in Georgia, there are so many other improvements, including the business, ease of doing business and other things. So I was wondering whether the positive impact of the airport is something, is due to something else that you highlighted in your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks for your question. Let's also start from Ms. BBQ.
Thank you very much for your question. As we shown in our study, the infrastructure project has had the greatest economic effect in the short term for the sub-region through which this railway passes. Accordingly, we analyze that the inflation of main sectors of real economy, such as construction, agriculture, and industry. And we obtained from the model that the greatest effects during the construction period, the project has impact on the construction work, increasing in construction work, and in the medium term, as a spillover effect, this project has greatest effect on the industry and agriculture production in the sub-region under consideration. And according to the GDP and tax income, in case that the GDP and is a macroeconomic indicators, and it's measured only by region or in the whole economy or country, we cannot we have not the GDP by sub-region. In this case, we use the GDP by region in the regional model, and also the tax revenues was also achieved only by regional data. In this case, by conducting the regional model, we obtained that the GDP in region has the project has impact on GDP by region in the medium term more than in the short term. And tax income have more greatest effects after the construction of the railway. It's said that this infrastructure project have more spillover effect on the macroeconomic performances of the region and of the country as a whole. And and in the short term has more greatest impact in the sub-region under consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, BBQ. Campbell, would you like to briefly respond?
Yes, thank you very much for your question. Yes, these negative effects, especially for the long term in terms of the cargo transportation and passenger turnover. Well, we do not think that this is a negative spillover effect. This is rather conditioned by the general economy conditions in Kyrgyzstan case, where the maybe before the 2008 world financial crisis, external trade was very increasing. And after the 2010, after the accession to the Eurasian Economic Union and in general other regional trends of external trade, we see that some downturn trade in external trade. So, this is the first reason we think so. And the second one is that, well, why we see for the longer term, maybe is that was a part of the question to Kazakhstan too, that these positive effects over time are decreasing. Well, this might be kind of diminishing returns that not only the investment into the infrastructure per se, but other associated government policies for the long term is very important, which is in our case maybe related with decreasing government regulations over the external trade, decreasing other trade barriers, and another question, another potential answer to this question might be that what we look at the road in our case, special case, we only this regional road. We only look at the part of Kyrgyzstan, but this road is also observed as a continuation of this road in Tajikistan, in People's Republic of China. So the further studies which take not only the one country but several countries where these roads are crossing would be very interesting and may provide further details in this direction.
Thanks. Nasta, would you like to briefly respond to the comment?
Yes. So due to some time constraints, I didn't mention all the details of my study. And first of all, we have some control variables in our model, which is the growth of labor force, foreign direct investments, and bank lending. And also, you asked about other factors which might have influenced this improvement, right? So that's why we deployed the ID model, which shows the improvement compared to other regions. So the factors that have positive effect nationwide are excluded from our results. Well, of course, there could be some other factors specifically affecting these regions, but with these controlling variables, we try to exclude most of them. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, today we have really good discussion about the infrastructure in Central Asia. Due to time constraint, I have to close this session. But if you have further questions, you can actually email to the authors. I think we can continue. And now let's thank all the speakers and also audience. Let's conclude this session and move to the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bihong, and thank you so much, speakers, for a very nice session. Let's move to the next panel discussion. So if you still have questions, please continue typing in Q&A, and we'll ask speakers to answer them, okay? So let's move next panel discussion. I would like to introduce moderator for panel discussion, Dr. Kaysar Abbas. He's chief for his research division of Karak Institute. His bio you can find using the link in the chat box. Dr. Kaysar, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tina. So we have a very distinguished panel today who is going to provide us the overview of the book. Before I go to my panelists, so I would like to highlight the importance of infrastructure development in the Central Asia. As we know that the Central Asian republics, Kazakhstan, the Kyrgyz Republic, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan are in the midst of a quiet yet remarkable economic transition on a scale not seen since the period immediately following the collapse of the Soviet Union. Leveraging their critical geography between the world's largest market, Central Asian governments are embarking on development strategies to increase regional and global connectivity, diversity, and modernize their economies and improve the welfare of their citizens. Behind these varying strategies for growth lies a common thread, which is known as infrastructure development. The role of infrastructure development and growth of an economy is paramount. Not only does infrastructure have a significant impact on economic development, but infrastructure development also eventually supports economic growth, trade, and investment. Conversely, a deficiency in infrastructure creates bottlenecks to economic development, growth, trade, and investment. However, physical or hard infrastructure alone cannot contribute to the economic development of an economy unless accompanied by so-called soft infrastructures. The Central Asia region requires a combination of soft infrastructure and physical infrastructure to achieve a sustained economic growth pattern. The overall landscape in these economies is progressing, but the region needs substantive measures to scale up infrastructure development. Along with infrastructure development, regional connectivity barriers need to be scaled down so that potential inter and extra-regional trade can be expanded. Exploring this trade potential requires not only sustained infrastructure development, but also an appropriate level of infrastructure connectivity. To overcome the challenges to infrastructure development, both traditional and non-traditional sources need to be exploited. However, having a sustainable infrastructure financing mechanism is a real challenge for these economies. So essential for developing both traditional and non-traditional infrastructure mechanism is to improve in the institutional and regulatory environment across the Central Asia. So with these my brief remarks about the topic for today's discussion, I would like to just go to my panelists. As we all know that each panelist is given 5 minutes for providing their overview about the book, and then we have a question answer session for 25 minutes after all the presentations or the talk is done. So for my first panelist, very distinguished panelist, is Dr. Guntur Sergiotro. He is a principal economist at Asian Development Bank. He received MSc and PhD degree from the School of Economics, University of Warwick and University of Nottingham, United Kingdom, respectively. Before studying in the UK, he has already obtained 2 university degrees in statistics and economics from Academy of Statistics and University of Indonesia. Before joining to ADB in 2004, he worked for University of Nottingham and Warwick in UK and Central Bureau of Statistics in Indonesia. He has published a significant number of works on a wide range of pertinent development issues, including on competitiveness, investment, tourism, economics, labor markets, poverty, CGA modeling, trade, liberalizations, and policy framework. The floor is yours, Dr. Guntur. Over to you.
Thank you so much for the introductions. First of all, I would like to say thank you so much for having me here. I just would like to emphasize that this issue is very, very important. And this is already proven actually, because remember that the gap of infrastructure in Central Asia is about at least 6 to 7 or even 8% of GDP, of the regional GDP. So the discussion about this infrastructure development in Central Asia is going to be going on in the future for sure. That's for sure. Second, I'm sure also that this is not the last we are going to sit down and discussing about the issue. So that my takeaways is more like for going forward, because anyway the book is already published, and I would like to congratulate to all of the authors on that. So my takeaways is more for the future. My next slide, please. Maybe can you the last slide first? Yeah. As was mentioned by Sonobe-san and the introduction before, that this issue has been in the heart of ADB also. We produce this meeting Asia infrastructure need, and we also did the infrastructure for inclusive growth in earlier years. To my surprise, actually, none of the book referred by all of the all of the papers. So maybe for the next time, I would like to researcher to look at the issue that we already discussed before, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't need to do anything from scratch, because if many already done before, I think better to just build up rather than to start all over from the beginning again. Second, please, my second slide, please. This is my kind of message, takeaway from for going forward. We are now entering the industry 4.0. In the industry 4.0, the big data and analytics are the key, as the heart of the question, kind of anything that we are doing. I have a blog on that. Please have a look on that too. So in that particular context, and when we are talking about infrastructure like this, we should asking much more deeper, much more thought-provoking question. Yeah, any infrastructure development nowadays, we should not just take it for granted. We should look at from the kind of spatially comprehensive perspective. We should make sure that the infrastructure development is actually optimum locally as well as nationally. That's very important. Because if you look around, actually, even in my country too, in Indonesia, we saw so many infrastructure development costing a lot to the economy, actually, rather than giving a lot of benefits. You can see that on the port, you can see that on the railway, you can see that on the road, you can see that on a special economic zone. There's so many examples of failed infrastructure products, of very bad infrastructure development product. This is well known everywhere, including in China, including in many other countries. So we must, from now on, we must make sure that all of the infrastructure development must be contextualized. We should not just look at the infrastructure alone, in isolation. We should focus on that. I give you an example. If you want to develop train station, there's the best location for a train station. The same for the school, the same for hospital. So that kind of notion nowadays is already made possible by the technology that we have, by the big data and analytics that I'm talking about. Like road, for instance. Yeah. For example, we have in the Central Asia, we have correct corridor roads, 6 correct corridor roads. If we are asked question now, if we want to develop the 7 corridor one, yeah, I'm challenging here. Which corridor is the most economically positive or beneficial one? That kind of question should be answered nowadays. And also we can assess among the 6 economic corridors that correct develop, we can find out which one is the most productive one to help the economy. Ongoing debate now, for instance, we can also see also that we have 6 correct corridor in the region, and we have also BRI from Chinese project. We can see how BRI and correct actually complementing each other or the other way around, and how the country must position in regard of this correct and BRI. So this is the kind of contextualization. This is the kind of general equilibrium perspective of the issue. I think that kind of perspective should be much more promoted and going forward. We cannot just look at infrastructure development in isolation. Why? Because if we look at all infrastructure development in isolation, we are going to end up saying everything is too rosy, because everything looks very good. Because if you can look at the infra road, for instance, you can look at the road and infra and household income. Of course, if you look at this kind of thing, that kind of relationship, that you are going to find a positive. But actually, the positive finding that we got can be misleading. Yeah. Second point that I would like to bring up is about the key challenge in impact evaluation. Yeah, we must answer the right question. We must define the right question, and then we should also defining the treatment and counterfactual in right way. And in some of the research in here, I would like to emphasize that, you know, access to road, access to railway, access to many different public infrastructure, that's actually varied.
So 1 minute more, please.
Okay.
1 minute. Yeah, thank you.
So that we should make the impact according to that accessibility. We cannot just put one access in kind of situation. And also there is also a possibility of spillover impacts. And this is well known in the literature as well. And that's the reason I'm kind of asking question about the presenter before. And way forward, I think I already put in there, we should have kind of much more deep down in asking question, make sure that we're asking the right question, because if we are asking the wrong question, and then we are not, we are wasting our resources basically. Yeah. And please also, when we are doing the impact evaluation, consider of no project case. This is the starting position again. What if there is no project? Do all of my assessment here still valid or not? That's kind of additional check-up we must make to make sure that our research is kind of relevant. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Guntur, for highlighting your key takeaways and also suggesting the way forward. I think it's really nice of you that you suggested one very important. I think that's the use of big data and analytics in the future work related to all kind of projects. Thank you so much. Now I will go to our next panelist. Our next panelist is Dr. Kubut Umarkov. Mr. Dr. Kubut has a PhD in economics from National University of Science at Kazakhstan. He worked in different positions of the government agencies of Kyrgyz Republic more than 50 years, including position of head of department of Prime Minister Office and deputy head of State Commission on Economic Reform. From 2005 to 2008, he worked as a director of economic research and statistics in ECO and regional intergovernmental organization based in Tehran. From 2015 to 17, he performed his duties as the first director of Kyrgyz Institute. His experience include as working as an international consultant in several projects, conducting studies on trade, in investment policy, regional integration, including economic corridors, etc. His research focus included Central Asia countries and Russian Federation. The floor is yours, Dr. Kubut.
Thank you, Mr. Kaysar Abbas. Thank you very much to ADB Institute for inviting me to be a panelist and to provide my comments and views on this book. I think that the situation in Central Asia with infrastructure development is not so bright. We have many difficulties in finding sources for financing of infrastructure. And according to a publication of ADB, for Central Asia countries, we need to have we need to invest annually about $33 billion, but the current picture is much, we have not exact figures, but it is maybe 50 or 60% of that figure. Currently in Central Asia, I would like to emphasize that this about economic research. Currently in Central Asia, most of high quality reports and papers are produced in the framework of technical assistance projects and programs, and there were not too much relevant papers prepared by think tanks. However, recently in the last 3-4 years, the picture started to change. Karek Institute started to work on supporting knowledge activities in the region, and we have more and more active researchers from different countries. So I am grateful to the authors of this book. I think it is very good initiative, and we need much more books on important topics of economic research in Central Asia. What are the main results of the book? I think it is clear picture that enhanced understanding of economic impacts of infrastructure in countries of Central Asia now we have, and we have great awareness of public, of private financing mechanisms for infrastructure development in the region. I would like to talk mostly about two presentations which are made today. It's case of Kazakhstan and case of Kyrgyzstan. Case of Kazakhstan, it is Kyrgyz railway construction, and this railway is of strategic importance since the distance from China to the southern regions of Kazakhstan and Central Asian countries, as a result of this construction, were reduced by 550 kilometers, and transit potential of the country increased significantly. And after the launch of the railway, more than 2,000 jobs were created. The study shows that spillover effects from the development of such an infrastructure project are highly significant for the local economy and can stimulate business activity in the region and generate employment. As regards the case for Kyrgyzstan, construction of Osh-Sarıtaş-Irkestan and Sarıtaş-Karamik roads. In this case, the methodology for evaluating the impact was the same. And these two projects are complementary in terms of their direction from Sarıtaş to Osh. And these are part of bigger roads or transport corridors. The road from Sarıtaş to Irkestan leads to the border with China, while the road from Sarıtaş to Karamik leads to Tajikistan. And both roads promote transport connections to neighboring countries, and they are part of transport corridors. As it was said earlier, the estimation results for the Kyrgyzstan case, some difficulties were observed in getting right and clear impact of construction project on variables, particularly. It was mentioned that there is positive and significant impact of road construction on retail trade volume during the short term. However, in the long term, there was noted a negative impact of road construction on cargo transportation, passenger turnover, volume, and retail trade.
1 minute more, please, guys.
What?
So 1 minute to go, please. 1 minute. You can wrap up in 1 minute. Thank you.
So these negative effects can be explained by fluctuations in macroeconomic situation and volatility in external trade flows and transit of goods. However, there could be another explanation that we can, coming back to major effects on the implementation of infrastructure projects, we can say that there are some major benefits from transport projects, which go to large national and international economic actors, corporations, foreign traders, transport companies, and also there are some broader economic effects, some broader socio-economic outcomes, which impact the consumption, incomes, and so on. And the book, which is under consideration, it provides information mostly on spillover impact on economies, on incomes, consumption, etc. But we should not forget about first effect of reducing transportation costs and time. But in case of Kyrgyzstan, there is another one important issue that we can say that the reason could be inability or poor implementation of policies by institutions, so low capacity of institutions, in order to maximize the potential for larger gains from transport corridors. They should implement necessary policies to have broader socio-economic outcomes, like through agglomeration effects, increased trade and migration, changes in local economic structures. And this is the most important takeaway which we need to derive from this book, that the governments should do the policies to increase this spillover impact on incomes, consumption, and so on. And second, what we need to do more research to respond to pressing economic problems in Central Asian region. And what I want to propose, maybe we need to conduct the same researches to publish books on transport corridors and economic corridors of Central Asia, on transit potential, maybe on regional value chains. I think this is very good perspectives for Central Asian region. I think we will see more researches conducted by ADBI and other think tanks. Thank you so much for attention.
No,
thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kobat, and thank you for providing your insightful comments and suggestions for future research and future studies in the region. Thank you so much. Now I go to next panelist. So our next panelist is Dr. Andy. Dr. Andy is the founder of Fast Tracks Group and a consulting firm known for delivering smart logistic solutions. He was the CEO and partner of high successful US multinational logistic company with a 9-figure revenue. Since 2009, Mr. Andy has worked from ADB in assisting the government for the PRC, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyz Republic, Tajikistan, Georgia, and Azerbaijan on transport infrastructure projects. His education includes MBA from the University of Chicago, MS in Industrial Engineering and Management from Northwestern University. He is the fellow of Intermodal Transportation Institute. Twice he served the U.S. Department of Commerce as an external of the project. His research interests include multi-modal transport, cold chain logistics, trade facilitation, and connecting Central Asian countries to the global value. Floor is yours, Dr. Andy.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the ADBI and CI for the opportunity to hear and share my views. And first, I want to comment that the book is a very comprehensive, informative, and a well-written book. Congratulations on that. And also, I want to attest personally on the effect of infrastructure development on economic development. I was born in Hong Kong and visited China numerous times since China opened up in 1978. And I can tell you that the little village that my parents came from, near Ningbo, China, with poor road when we first arrived, to today being a part of the Ningbo municipal area with an economic activity rivaling Shanghai is one of the most prosperous part of China. And all that, certainly infrastructure development play a very, very important role. And the Ningbo port is one of the largest port in China. And in terms of the book, I just want to offer some future directions in terms of a further study. So for somebody that come from the private sector and spend most of the professional life in that area, I would suggest more focus on soft infrastructure development. And that was touched upon by some of the panelists before, including Mr. Sugiyato. And also, I want to stress having infrastructure and hard infrastructure especially does not produce a result until you nurture the development of a business ecosystem that will link and interact with the infrastructure that's being built to achieve economic development goals. That will include nurturing the transport and logistics industry, the trade services, developing foreign trade, and putting in the proper government regulations, laws to protect the private sector. And for example, Uzbekistan, which is now opening up, one of the key reform is to grow the trucking industry and the rail industry and to promote trade. And this is something that I look at with a lot of pleasure and knowing that they're taking the right steps. And then other things to look at are ways to maximize the returns on infrastructure investment. This includes not overlooking some of the existing infrastructure. They may be old, but they can be rejuvenated, repurposed, and put into new use. And they will save a lot of money from all the investment that's needed, and knowing the government budget is tight. And also, we cannot overlook the importance of maintenance and repair to the existing infrastructure to be sure that they last a long time. And working in Central Asia, I've seen many situations that somebody put in a new road and then a new road died within 5 years. And also, it's very important to adopt effective management models to run the infrastructure the right way, and also to build the infrastructure the right way, adopting total quality management principles and like precision schedule railroading that's being implemented in the US in a big way right now and achieve some really impressive results. And also, it's very important to synchronize and to do systematic development of all the infrastructures in a holistic way. So for example, having a multimodal center connected to rail and road networks, and make sure that the network development is done without silos, so that you develop one that optimizes the whole system, not one that pleases a certain ministry at the expense of some other sectors of the economy. And then by using innovative funding schemes, you can capture the value created by infrastructure development. And a good example is the Hong Kong MTR, one of the very, very few public transport companies that actually make money. And then of course, ADB and CI has collaborated strongly in developing the CPMM program. And that program generates a lot of useful data that I think should be very helpful to many of the participants here, and also to the Kyrgyz government. So that concludes my comments, and I thank you for the opportunity to do that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Andy, for the comprehensive feedback and also the way forward. You have just highlighted very good points and areas which need to be focused in the coming research. Thank you so much again. So our next panelist is Dr. Alejandro Ordino. He is the Principal Research Fellow at the Middle East Institute, National University of Singapore. He is the Co-Director of the Security and Crisis Management International Center at the Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences, and an external associate at China Institute, King's College London. His 2 decades of experience in China encompass in security analysis and crisis management. His main research interests include China, Central Asia, and Middle East, North Africa relations, private military and security companies, and Chinese security and foreign policy. Alexandro is the author of several books, and he has published papers and commentaries in various journals in Italian, English, and Chinese language. The floor is yours, Dr. Ardini.
Distinguished colleague, good afternoon from Singapore. Dr. Kazarabas, thank you very much for the too kind introduction. I'm very pleased to be here today discussing the book outcome, especially because here in Singapore, we are looking at the increase and tangible possibility of cooperation between ASEAN, Singapore, and Central Asia. I do believe that the publication, it's very timely, considering the ongoing constraint in public financial models, and especially the recent negative impact and economic shock and the ongoing health crisis. I would like to focus my comment especially on the role of private-public partnership and the momentum that Central Asia need for infrastructure in order to maintain its growth. The previous speaker underlined the role of PPP in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Georgia, but I want to focus my comment on a chapter in the book, the one by Zhao Chuanhou, that is related to a historical evaluation of public financing in China. In my personal opinion, the chapter well analyzes how behind the rapid growth of infrastructure in the People's Republic of China, there are plenty risk of a massive and too rapid build-up of infrastructure financing. My field of study is crisis management. Therefore, I tend to look most not at the best practice, but at the failure. And how to manage this failure can help us in the ongoing process. So in the chapter is well underlined how China modernization proceeded and is proceeding at a very high speed in infrastructure development. We can call it a breakneck pace as, if I recall correct, in 1995, more than 400 billion renminbi were invested in infrastructure. And in 2014, it increased 27-fold with more than 11 trillion renminbi. During the evolution of the infrastructure financing, there were several problems that mainly can be summarized in 3 points, as the author of the study well underlined. First, difficulty in financing. Second, expensive financing. And the more actual problem, the third one, that is emerging in recent times and is related to unregulated financing. So in my opinion, this working paper comprehensively review the historical trend of China infrastructure financing, elucidating 5 stages, macro stages, in financial models and associated risk. For time constraint, I would like to focus on the latest one. That is the 5th stage, from the 2015 to nowadays. And this stage focuses on central government increasing the debt volume of local government, and at the same time rationalize the way that local government can borrow. Rationalization essentially stemmed out of central government need to standardize management of public infrastructure projects. Having said so, local government were allowed to issue bond and engage in public-private partnership, basically to realize sustainable construction and operation of public infrastructure, and at the same time guarding against the rise of unnecessary and insecure debt. Debt risk is still a big problem associated to public-private partnership, but we have to look not only at the success story of China from 2015 up to now, as presenter before from Kazakhstan, for example, underlined how in Kazakhstan the triple P started in 2018. So we can benefit also from China's failure several years early on Kazakhstan example, and looking at this failure, what they can teach us. As distinguished colleague, Professor Sujiharto, just underlined a few minutes before, looking at the negative spillover, or even looking at the question if we don't need to start an infrastructure project, are important lesson for
1 minute to wrap up, please, Guy.
For Central Asia and regional central government partnership. In this respect, I have just to say that in some local private-public partnership in China, the large scale and the fast speed of the macro infrastructure project led to the model being abused and become a method of, let's say, undisguised direct financial involvement by local government. Therefore, in the next publication, I would like to suggest or to see how central local government approach risk can be shared, and especially with a local approach and a multidisciplinary approach, looking at the role of big data in terms of actionable intelligence, and last but not least, looking at the digital infrastructure gap and how Central Asia can benefit with the partnership with Asia also. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ardino, and highlighting the role of public-private partnership and raising the funding or the financing issues in Central Asia. Thank you so much. Our last panelist of today's discussion is Dr. Naoyuki Yoshino. He is a professor emeritus at Keio University, Tokyo, Japan, and he was a CEO and a dean of Asian Development Institute. He obtained his PhD from Johns Hopkins University. He received honorary doctorate degree from University of Gothenburg, Sweden. And Dr. Yoshino has been a visiting scholar at different places. He has published different books, articles, journals in different areas. He is currently visiting a professor at Scripps and visiting lecturer at the University of Tokyo. The floor is yours, Dr. Yoshino.
Thank you very much. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think success of the infrastructure investment is whether it can positively impact to the region. I visited Beijing and Shanghai in 1990 and 1991. There was no highway between Shanghai or Beijing airport and downtown. There were so many bicycles. In 1985, I visited Manila, Jakarta, Singapore, KL, and Bangkok. There was no highway between the airport and downtown. It took so long to get to the city. So I think infrastructure is, one is economic efficiency. Secondly, along these railways, road, highways, airport, lots of businesses can start their own activities and income disparities can be mitigated. Small businesses can start their own restaurant, their own shop along the road, and so on. So I think the spillover effects today's researchers has looked at is very important. And I think it is another important thing is disclosure of those spillover impacts could also reveal the success or failure of infrastructure investment. Many failed infrastructures, there is no incentive for infrastructure companies to develop the region. One of the examples I looked at the metro in Delhi. Subway, metro Delhi has no incentive to develop the station area. But if part of this development can be captured by railways and subways, then the operation becomes much better. The best example is Hong Kong Metro. Hong Kong Metro could use the land along the station. Then spillover effects has been captured by Metro in Hong Kong. So that is a success story. And failed case is India's Metro, because there is no connectivity between spillover effects and operations. So I think incentive mechanism is important, and also the measurement of the impact as a disclosed way will be very important. Next one is we have to bring private sector finance. COVID-19 made many countries lack of public space of financing. Then in private financing, banks are dominating in many Asian regions. We have to develop pension funds and insurance together with bank financing. So at the beginning, banks can provide loans and investment into infrastructure, but later on, we should develop insurance and pension funds so that long-term investors can come into infrastructure investment. And in Asian region, savings are growing in many countries, but most of the savings are deposited into the bank rather than putting their money into insurance or pension system. So financial education is important to make people to diversify their assets, savings into long-term financing. Lastly, I would like to talk about infrastructure bond, which can incorporate spillover tax revenues. You can see from point T2, the operation will start. Then user charges is the bottom line, but spillover effects of the economic activities will become bigger and bigger. In the past, all of these spillover tax revenues went to the government. They were not returned to infrastructure investors and operators. So infrastructure investors only relied on user charges at the bottom black line. But spillover revenues were very large. All of them went to the government, and they were not returned to infrastructure operators. So this proposal is part of those spillover revenues here. For example, 50% should be returned to infrastructure investors. Then the rate of return will go up this way. And so that the rate of return used to be only user charges, but part of spillover tax revenue can be returned to infrastructure investors. Then their rate of return will become red line instead of black line. That can keep maintenance costs and repair costs. And there is a strong incentive for infrastructure operators to develop the region that can mitigate income disparities. And lastly, in order to encourage small businesses to participate in their business along railway and roads, financing is important. Not only bank loans, but crowdfunding can help those small businesses can start up their business. So that's all my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yoshino. I think very comprehensive feedback and also very good points and suggestions for the future research and books and projects. So I think we will move to the last part of this session. So I think we have already utilized maximum time. And during the discussion, we have just 10 minutes left for the question and answer session. So I can start with my question, one or two questions from my side, from the panelists, and then I think we can go to the one or two questions from the participants. And I just want to ask one question from Dr. Yoshino. I start from you. So as we know, that Central Asia is less densely populated compared to South Asia and Southeast Asia. How would it be possible to make infrastructure investment into much higher economic effect in the Kyrgyz region?
Okay, as you pointed out, South Asia, Southeast Asia, North Asia, it is very highly densely populated. If the road is constructed, lots of business can there, lots of apartments can be constructed. But in Central Asia, it is less populated. And then one city to one village to another is very far away. I think connectivity and spillover effects of cross-border connectivity is very important in Kyrgyz region and Central Asia, because each country has less densely populated, but cross-border trade, cross-border activities, one country has lots of natural resources. One country has agricultural products, and those connectivity can be succeeded by infrastructure investment. So in Kyrgyz region and Central Asia, cross-border activities should be encouraged by the development of infrastructure investment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yoshino. So I have another question from Dr. Guntur. How would it be possible to bring private sector finance into infrastructure investment? And what do you think are the main challenges in bringing private investment or private financing to infrastructure development?
That's a very good and tough question. The answer is that we should not rely on public sector, because we know that, remember the Central Asian situation, the need for infrastructure development is about at least 7 to 8% of regional GDP. And the country only growing less than 5. So even if all of the growth is used for investing in infrastructure, that's not enough. And we're talking about the government capability to finance the infrastructure is also very limited. So the solution, the short answer for that is the country must be kind of innovative in the sense that we must rely more to the private sector. And if we wanted to attract the private sector, the biggest question, this is also answering the question and the question and answer. The biggest question is how to package the project. How to package the project to make it attractive from the private sector perspective. That's the only way you can invite the private sector to contribute to the kind of infrastructure development. If you look at it in the book, there's a paper from China, right? If you look at the China case, actually, that's something that other countries cannot emulate. Because if you look at the China paper, can I share my slide, my things?
Yes, maybe we can request Dr. Dina. Can you please help Dr. Guntur to upload the slides, his slides?
No, it's not slide. Sorry, it's not slide. I have a note here, but I would like to share it. Basically, it's like this. In the paper, in the book, there's kind of graph that the financing of infrastructure in China is still rely very much from the bank loans. That can only be done in Chinese situation in which the bank is actually more or less part of the government. But in other countries, that cannot be done. So it's not this. Sorry, it's not this. In my
Dr. Guntur, we have a limited time, so we can move forward, please. So if you,
yeah. Basically, that's the key answer for that is that we need to package the project to make it attractive to the private sector, and that's rely on the kind of biggest challenge in the government side, because when it comes to the packaging the project, the government has more or less no capability for doing that. That's bring to the importance of the capacity development for the infrastructure development. So for the next research, I think we should emphasize on the how to finance the infrastructure development by emphasizing the private public partnership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Guntur. So last question from my side, then I will go to the participants. And then my last question is from Dr. Alexandro Ordino. Can you please tell us how this COVID-19 has an impact in the infrastructure development in Central Asia? So very briefly, kindly.
Yes, COVID-19 essentially didn't create itself a shock on the overall Central Asia, but it accelerated already established problems. Therefore, in this respect, the answer to COVID-19 is not only related to the pandemic itself, but it's an old answer to the ongoing problem. It interrupted a very fast economic growth of the region. And in order to avoid the disruption of this positive growth, we need essentially to find other public vehicle that in partnership with the private sector are going to increase the efficiency and return Central Asia on its growing path.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ordino. Now I think we have one question in the Q&A box. What is the most essential thing for developing infrastructure? So please share the challenges in implementing the project. So any panelist can take this question, please.
Okay, so can I just answer from my own view?
Yes, Dr. Yoshino,
to bring in private sector finance, I think there are two things. One is rate of return from infrastructure investments are very low. And there are lots of risks and corruptions in many developing countries. So those two are the difficulties in bringing private sector finance into infrastructure development. First, how to increase the rate of return. I'm proposing spillover tax revenue should be shared with government and infrastructure investors so that the rate of return is coming from not only user charges, but spillover return. That will give them the incentive to develop the region. Then lots of bankable projects could be possible. Second one is corruption. Except for China, land acquisition is very difficult. And when in the land acquisition, lots of politicians come in. And then the corruption is often observed in land transaction. I think land trust is one of the ways to disclose the land price, and also the ownership will become much more clear. So I think land acquisition should be cleared and transparent, and those are the two important things in infrastructure finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Yoshino. Also, any other question from the participants? Anyone would like to ask any other questions? So we can take one more question, if any question.
Dr. Kaysar, there is one question by Yusuf, raised hand.
Yes, please.
Okay. Yusuf Gayubov, you may unmute yourself.
Yes, can you listen to me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'm greeting you from Manila. My question to presenters, how do you see the chances of applying design, build, operate mode in CAREC countries? Like we can, as you mentioned, to increase the involvement of private sector to infrastructure projects. Maybe we can encourage this kind of approach in CAREC regions that private sector are interested to finance, to invest, and then to gain their benefits from the projects. How you see this the future in the CAREC region?
Okay, so if I can answer my way, I think in general,
yes, Professor Yoshino.
We have seen in CAREC region there is a big spillover effects if the infrastructure is very good, and that can increase regional GDP. That can contribute huge increase of tax revenues. And as I mentioned, all those tax revenues currently go to the government without being returned to infrastructure investors. And infrastructure investors only relied on user charges. If it were water supply, digital infrastructure, people prefer low price, low fees, but private investors prefer high rate of return. So there is conflict between users and private investors in infrastructure investment in the past. That's why PPP didn't go very well. But today's research shows there's a big spillover effects in many projects, in many infrastructure in Central Asia. So that means if those spillover tax returns were paid back partly to infrastructure investors, then their rate of return will significantly increase. Furthermore, infrastructure investors has big incentive to develop the region, and that can be applied to digital infrastructure. So I think that is one of the ways to attract private investors by increasing spillover effects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think now already we are above time. So I would like to thank all the panelists for giving us time and for providing very comprehensive review of the book and although very limited time. Thank you so much. And also providing very thought-provoking ideas and suggestions for the future work. Thank you so much. And I would like to give floor back to Dr. Dina. Over to you, Dr. Dina, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kaysar, and all speakers for very nice interactive session. So I would like to just briefly post the results. Results are very interesting. So we see that among all infrastructure, top infrastructure, transport and energy. So for both questions, which you are interested and which investments are needed. So transport and energy, followed by water and telecommunications. Okay, so let's continue with next final closing session, closing remarks. I would like to invite, just a second. I would like to invite Dr. Iskandar Abdullayev. He is Deputy Director from Karak Institute, and his biography you can read from the link in the chat box.
Thank you very much, Dina. Dr. Abbas, first of all, let me also join to our directors and Dean Snowby to congratulating you with launching very interesting, at the same time, very relevant paper, book, Developing Infrastructure in Central Asia. Indeed, this paper is timely and very much relevant to the ongoing developments. First of all, we have to address the question of how much infrastructure we need in Central Asia. It's very important, and we are talking about billions of dollars. And then what kind of infrastructure is also very important. Priorities, setting the priorities, how it's set in different countries is relevant to future development of the region. Would it be, again, investing to most of the infrastructure which have been last 30 years developed, or coming in some emerging issues due to new situation? And then also relevant questions have been addressed on how to fund this infrastructure, from which sources, and sustainability of financing. I think COVID-19 brought a very interesting situation into the infrastructure. First of all, it could be a new start. Currently, we seen that all countries of the region have promised to put 5 to 6% of their own GDP to post-COVID-19 recovery. How much of it will go to the infrastructure, in which type of infrastructure? And again, we have been engaged in discussion on new infrastructure. We're talking green infrastructure or not green infrastructure. That's also a very relevant topic. I think discussions have highlighted some part of it. And then also new financing options. We came with a lot of options, but mainly we are focusing on private investment. It's clear that public investment is not sufficient, or at least will be not enough for growing demands for the infrastructure investment in this region. And then also we saw that quite few new emerging ideas, both from the researchers here but also from governments. Last maybe a few months, governments are talking about new corridors, new roads, opening of the region, and also increasing connectivity of the region via new corridors. How we look these issues and how it will be financed. But I also agree, most of colleagues, what they say, the infrastructure investment doesn't depend the willingness of the private companies or private entities to invest. It also depends how much financial and institutional capacity each country is devoted to improve investment environment overall. I think without good investment the environment and reforms in this sector, most probably we'll witness again problems with investment speed. And then also we have to take care, we were discussing, and we had even early discussions about new challenges, especially in climate change, how much our infrastructure have to be really resilient. And on the other hand, also we are recognizing that currently, at least now a few years, there will be reduction in foreign direct investment to the region for known reasons, because we see that most of the regions and other countries, global players are really more concerned their own development paths and own development restructuring rather than investing to CARIC countries. Then also one good point which I would like to add, it is maybe follow up to this new book which is developing infrastructure in Central Asia. We got a very interesting question. How much the infrastructure is performing? Do we measure this performance, and does this the infrastructure contribute good development, healthy development of countries? I think one example which also brought this CPMM analysis, I think we built up rather similar studies to understand performance of both existing infrastructure and potential performance of new infrastructure. On this, I think CARIC Institute jointly with ADB could join hands to understand, continue the research we started on infrastructure, but maybe on top of it, there was a lot of mentioning of the capacities in planning, in locating, in financing this infrastructure. We can really do this as a follow-up next step. Also, maybe we have to understand about the data on infrastructure, because sometimes we start to analyze the infrastructure development in CARIC region, a lot of data gaps we face. I think these are also other areas we can really dig together. What I think is good step is taken, and I think we had a good book launch today, and follow-up meetings will continue. We will also continue on areas today have been highlighted on different aspects of infrastructure. It's development and planning, it's financing and maintenance, but also priorities. And I would like to again call for partnerships, and I see today we had a very good number of researchers from CARIC countries. This also a good indication that this topic is relevant, and also CARIC Institute itself, and also calling with ADBI colleagues, we will continue this research and capacity building partnership on this area. I would like to stop and thank all your for your attention, attendance, and also good ideas which you have shared today. Thank you. Dina, back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kaysar. I would like to invite Peter Morgan. He's Senior Consulting Economist, Vice Chair of ADBI. Please, Peter.
Thanks very much, Dina. I'd like to congratulate the editors of this book for a very nice accomplishment. As someone who's been involved in this project on the periphery since its beginning, I know it was a long and winding road. There were many difficulties that were faced along the way. It was, I think, because it was sort of a pioneering work in terms of applying the difference type analysis to Central Asia and trying to get sufficient data to make this kind of analysis. As Iskandar mentioned, getting the data itself was a major issue in this project, and I think it does highlight the need for governments to make available the sorts of data that would make this kind of analysis possible. I would also mention that there is obviously a close connection between the two aspects of the project, the infrastructure impacts and the financing, and of course this is very much the contribution of Dean Yoshino to try to the basic idea of trying to involve the private sector in financing is to increase the potential revenues to the private sector, and this would be accomplished basically by diverting some of the spillover tax revenue increases to the private sector investors. So there's a very close link between the two aspects of this project. But also I would like to thank ADB for their fostering of this project. We had lots of useful inputs and guidance from them. I particularly mentioned Dai Chang Song in particular. And I hope going forward that we can continue this collaboration between ADBI, ADB, and the CARIC Institute. Thanks very much.
Many thanks, Peter, for closing remarks. So thanks to everyone. We did very good with time and the book launch. I would like to remind everyone all the links in the chat So we finished, but we'll remain open for maybe 5 minutes and we'll play video so you can watch again our nice videos. So if you want continue to talk, please, that's fine. Do we need another photo, or everyone happy with the photo we took at the beginning, or anyone missed it and would like a photo? Okay, I think the first photo was fine. Yeah, thank you so much for joining all speakers, and thank you very much for your great support.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye.
Thank you
Very much.
bye-bye
Thank you.